Welcome to the Sprocket Pod, your podcast for helpful HubSpot content. I'm Cameron Collins, and alongside my co-host Mark Lerner, we sit down each week with experts on the HubSpot CRM to break down cool builds and unique apps that will make your instance better. Whether you're a new admin or you're a business owner looking to get the most out of HubSpot, our conversations are going to provide you with unique insights that you can apply. Don't forget, we host the Sprocket Pod live on LinkedIn every week, and you can catch all of our episodes on YouTube and Spotify. Let's dive into today's episode and get you working smarter with HubSpot. Hello and welcome indeed to the Sprocket Pod. For those of you who don't know, again, my name is Cameron Collins. I am a RevOps strategist with RevPartners. I'm a huge advocate of the Sprocketeer community, and we've got my co-host Mark Lerner here, Director of Growth Marketing with DealHub. Today, we're super excited for our guest, Nick Zeckets with Air Traffic Control. Welcome to the Sprocket Pod, Nick.
Thanks, y'all. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, welcome.
Air traffic control, the theme of our conversation today is going to be personalized content, creating a personalized piece of content versus sending people personal content. There's a huge difference, but I'd like for you, Nick, to start with just an overview on air traffic control, what it is, and really how it plays into this theme.
Yeah. Thank you. So we're a relevance engine for HubSpot with a really key focus on enabling one-to-one account-based experience programs. And that's just a bunch of buzzword that just went along with that. That's when you say what's your elevator pitch. And is that both confusing enough and provocative enough to get you to ask, say more? But it's not terribly useful. What we really mean is we try to figure out what all the contacts in somebody's HubSpot instance care about, their interests, and we have a number of ways that we do that. And then we look at a company's content and say, of all the things that are here, this is a great blog for Cameron. This is a great case study for Mark. And then we stick that stuff back into HubSpot so that when you build lifecycle programs or website content experiences, whatever you want to do, you can really optimize it down to the person level and then figure out what to do next in terms of how you stay relevant. And I think as you were talking through, Cameron, your intro there, that's a word that we use a lot. And sure, it's like maybe a market making word and we're trying to create a category, but really what we're just talking about is this evolution from personalization as that word has been ruined. Right. And I'm happy to dig into more of what I mean by that, but that's ATC in a nutshell, is really trying to just connect the very best of what you have to people on an individual level so you can get back to doing the work that marketers are best at, which is not holding 72 touch points together with their fingers.
Mark, I feel like you've got something to say.
Oh, I have so much to say, but I also want to take a little time. I think my laugh was a recognition, and maybe for everybody out there, a recognition of just how inundated we all are with really bad, quote unquote, personalization these days. I think you're not a marketer if you haven't at least once messed up and sent out a blast email that had the merge tags not filled in. We all did. We've all done it. It's happened to everyone. But these days, I think we're in this weird world where AI has made it so easy that dumb people are doing it and doing it really poorly. And it's marketers, we've ruined everything, and I think we've ruined this. It sounds like you're approaching this with an understanding of that being the reality and trying to take it in a different way. And so I'm interested to hear how you differentiate and how you can offer an alternative to leveraging personalization or whatever we're calling it without it being just obnoxious.
Yeah, dude. Yep, to all that. We're can't give marketers nice things. Look, dude, there's a word called spend tax. It has been around for a really long time. People were using machine learning to run spend tax to volume create content, for SEO gaming, to volume pass through very lightweight email filters back in the day, do enough that you would never get caught in the spam folder. This isn't new, right? This legitimately isn't new. And all those practices, while in short term might have been a clever way to boost some short-term revenue, were never about the recipient. They were never about the customer. They were never about your prospect. And it really just was this opportunity with the advent of generative AI for, to your point, Mark, to enable a lot more people, very few of whom have ever really even thought about who they're reaching out to and really why it matters, to scale up quote unquote spend tax. And I think we've all gotten those emails, right? It's, oh, I can see, Nick, that you live in Lexington, Massachusetts with this restaurant that's down the street. Ever been there? By the way, we sell IT offshore services. I'm just, what? This is wild. Who cares? This is such insane personalization, and it's irrelevant to me. It's irrelevant to the pitch, and it puts you at risk at scale of really ruining your business. And I think in a world where we're all starting to get our heads wrapped around the idea that we have a finite universe, all of us do. We all love to talk about, oh, our addressable market is millions of units. Dude, it's not. It's just not. It might be hundreds, it might be thousands, but what's absolutely true is that whatever your truly addressable market is, if your execution is mediocre, you will set your business on fire. It's a fact, right? That is an absolute fact. And I think there's this really interesting kind of like moment in time where we're at, where I think marketing ops and rev ops leaders have more value to the business than they've ever had before. Because if you're planful enough with the types of signals and data providers and things like that are out there, which are not our jam, right? But I look at Clay and Bardeen and Keyplay and all these guys. If those things put you in a position to know when and what, you don't need the spin tax. You don't have to do quote unquote personalization. You just have to execute the right thing at the right time because you have an indication that's there. But I think the enduring place where we really live is this idea that companies have built a bunch of content, blogs and case studies and webinars and all this stuff, and it's just sitting there and it's not doing anything. And that's where we really see this like untapped opportunity where we're not making stuff up. There was a human who wrote that case study along with customer input. It's really good, it's solid, and it's just not doing anything, right? Because it's just waiting for people to discover it. And that's a lot of what we really realized was, hey, you've built all this stuff. That's actually a foundation for personalization, quote unquote. And what we really mean is it's a foundation for relevance. I know enough about you and I've got all this awesome content. If I can connect the dots more reasonably, good things ought to happen based on human work as opposed to Gen AI spend tax.
To your point, personal content is different from personalized content. And so
Mm,
it sounds like the big bet that ATC is making is people don't care that you know that there's a restaurant around the corner from where they live and you have that in the hook of your email, the hook.
right.
What they are more inclined to care about is you sent them something that is relevant and positions you as an authority figure because you're sending them a piece of helpful content that is actually tied to their interests.
That's right. That's right. Back to the restaurant example. Look, if you worked for a restaurant POS service or something like that, and you said, there's a restaurant in the town that you live in that uses our restaurant POS, and they're having a lot of success, and I'd love to tell you about that success. That's relevant. But telling me that the restaurant down the street and you sell offshore IT services is bananas. Like, in what
They're
world?
they're optimizing for the wrong metric. They're
Yep.
optimizing for open rates, and open rates are useless because if you open it because it's something related to the store down the street, and then you read about offshore IT services and you mark it as junk, it's worse. It's like
Work.
the people are not thinking these things through.
Do less better, dude. Do less better. I scream it all the time. Everything gets better when that happens.
Except if you're incentivized on the wrong metrics. If these people are incentivized on open rates, hey, your manager's like, hey, you got to get those open rates up. Then
Yeah.
they're gonna just optimize for that, even to the detriment of it's the that philosophical mind game about the paperclip and the
Mm.
AI. At its most extreme, if you have an AI that's benign and has no training, and you say your number one priority is to make paperclips, eventually it will destroy the entire world in its pursuit of paperclips. And I think it's the same thing.
Yeah, I think the metrics, that's really interesting to me, talking about how we have these perverse incentives
For sure.
for a lot of our revenue team is to say this is your North Star. And I think frankly it's because it's a lot harder to manage team members where we aren't entirely sure how to connect their activities to pipeline. And
Mm.
that's not, and again, it's we do have an idea of how much pipeline every piece of content a company has created is actually influence. It's really pretty interesting, but it's not our game. We look at the hockey stacks of the world and it's okay, this is starting to get actually pretty interesting. And it's if we're all running at that pipeline and that closed one number, that's the job. And yes, emails will have a role to play, but it's is it a volume play? Is it an open rate play? Or if I get the right 4 clicks, am I all of a sudden driving pipeline? And it's okay. I think that's a really exciting place for people to be spending more time. Again, not our, we don't really influence that world at all, but we definitely ascribe to the idea that you got to be getting aligned, which is why I think I like the concept of ABM. It's why I like associating ATC with ABM, not because ABM is like the thing that we do exclusively, but it happens to be the mindset where our proposition flies the best. If you're really trying to execute ABM, you are saying that you are at least pursuing alignment across the revenue organization. And I think that content is one of those things that has an opportunity to play everywhere from awareness to retention and expansion.
I'm dying to take a look at ATC.
Yeah,
We'll
let's
pull
see
it
it.
up here and do a run through of the demo because to me, this really hits home with the fact that essentially you're making sure that companies don't write blogs, which are then forgotten about. And I think
Mm,
that certainly happens all too often where you put it on your website and after 12 months, nobody's going and digging through 12 months of blog archives to find that old piece of content. So this
Yep,
essentially takes all of your content, makes it evergreen.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we have to stop asking our customers to do our work for us. And this is a way to really help them. So here's the jam. And what we do is we connect in, you go through the HubSpot marketplace. For anybody who's listening in, we will always get you connected for free, do a custom analysis of your situation, give you a sense of your preparedness to run at ABM. But what's happening here is every email open and click, every page visit. When I do sales calls, I have Grain recording the notes from those. We have an integration with AirCall when you've got your BDRs and AEs making calls and those transcripts are coming in. All of that is incredible source material for understanding what somebody cares about. We also layer in automated enrichment with LinkedIn profiles and what people are posting to LinkedIn. We also go and automate company research, but all of this information allows us to build an interest graph. And the interest graph is pretty specific, right? This is one that's talking about cloud native and Cloudera and edge clouds and startups and platform nine and infrastructure and the Dubai municipality. There are concepts in here that I don't even know what they are, but that's okay, right? That's totally fine. What's interesting is that this interest graph for every single contact is automatically getting updated every single day by air traffic control. And that's the crux of ATC is that if we deeply understand somebody and what they care about, and we keep a finger on that, we can do a really great job of recommending content. And the way that happens is we are totally agnostic to the sources of content. It could live inside your HubSpot. It could be on a WordPress page. It could be behind it could be on YouTube or a podcast on Spotify. We're able to consume any kind of content. And then as a result of getting that content, we then read it. Our system figures out what it's about. And this is a place where I think a lot of marketing teams, particularly in the enterprise and at least larger in a mid-market, they have experience with this idea of like tag management and all these different types of things. And they spend an exorbitant amount of money to tool their marketing team in a way that allows them to apply tags consistently across their content. That's never going to work. It's not going to get your depth of information. It's not going to cover everything that you're going to get at. It also is impossible to scale. And if you don't have somebody dedicated to that work, it doesn't happen at all. We go into HubSpot and we're like, oh, this is a blog about finance, but it actually is covering 15, 20, maybe 40 topics. So we grab all those topics and we use all that to say, of everything that I know about Cameron or Mark, these are the things that we think each one of them will find most interesting at a personal level. And here's how that gets back to HubSpot, right? This is really important. It isn't just, oh, okay, that's interesting for Cameron. What we do is, and I'm going to pull up, Cameron, now your contact record in our HubSpot account. You can see that there's a next best content here about a step-to-step guide to a personalized LinkedIn and HubSpot campaign. But if we go in and we look at all your properties, what we do here is we automatically create a whole new set of properties. And for every contact, we recommend 3 of every type of content the company has. So here at ATC, we have blogs, playbooks, podcasts, et cetera, et cetera. So here you'll see that this is the number 1 recommended blog for you, Cameron, is the step-by-step guide. But then we also have a property for the image for that. We have a property for the link. We have the meta description property. We have the summary as a property. And then down here, you'll see these are the podcasts. So one on demand generation, consolidating tech spend with Ryan Gunn. All of these recommendations are sitting and updated on every single contact record every single day, so that when you go and create, let's say, an email, I'll pull up a simple template, but when you go and set up an email, the same way that people are used to using Hey First Name, you now can drop in the recommended blog or case study or whatever it is that you've got. And when we go and preview that, Mark, let's look at yours. This email went out the door to Mark, right? Mark, here's the stuff that you're going to get.
Okay.
And then if I got the same email, this is what I would see. Completely different, tuned down to the human level. There's no tagging. There are no segments. There are no workflows. This template you could send at any time, and it's going to deliver the very best of everything that you have. And the same thing works, by the way, when you're thinking about HubSpot. You can throw this into chat. You can have it be a banner on a page for a returning visitor, create an ABM style landing page or a completely customized content hub on your website.
Does it have to be your own owned content, or is it, like you said, agnostic, even beyond your own?
So my man, I appreciate you.
No problem.
We offer a syndicated content service. Our customers can pick any 10 topics that they care about. Those 10 topics, we grab every mention of any of those 10 topics from 50,000 highly authoritative sources every single week. And we pull them in and you can use them, right? We recommend them down to the person level. We're adding a new content type called partner content. Add your partners in, which I think is awesome. We partner with a ton of different companies, agencies, right? We could pull in RevPartner stuff. And then we've got partnerships with Aircall and Grain and they write amazing stuff that's relevant to our customers. It wouldn't make sense for us to write it just in general. But now that we can share it on behalf of our partners with our customers, it's just this more comprehensive value proposition. And it also means you can pursue Allbound in a way that's just a lot healthier, right? It's just a lot sexier. It's, hey, I just want to be in the middle of the conversation. I might not be the answer, but I'd love to always be a place that you can get it.
So we have an ongoing kind
Got
of
that grin.
discussion. Yeah, we have a meta conversation that's happening between Cameron and I about something you brought up that you saw me light up my face. What to you is Allbound? What does that mean?
Dude, I don't know. Look, marketers love marketing to marketers.
Yeah.
We think it's so awesome. We love to give things new names. Look, channel and partner marketing has existed for ages and ages. The vast majority of the biggest tech companies in the country, but also the largest industrial companies in the country, have all been doing this forever. But it's essentially to say, what we need to recognize is that we are not the end-all be-all solution to you. Not even HubSpot. You can't even get everything you need out of Salesforce or Adobe, right? There's other things that you will need that these companies don't do, which is why they have ecosystems. And when you're huge, the ecosystem works a little bit differently. But when you're smaller, like air traffic control, or a lot of other companies are, certainly compared to those guys, what you're sitting there and saying is, how can we go together? What's the better together story? How do we tell this story in a more meaningful way? And how do we benefit from working with each other? Aircall is somebody that we've recently started working with, and our ability to take a transcript from a call that a BDR just had outbound with a prospect and turn that into an interest graph and content recommendations. It's not anything that they had on their roadmap, but it's obviously valuable to their customers. And we don't have anything with regards to calling or any of that kind of, tooling. We didn't really have a good way to get to that information because you actually can't get it out of HubSpot. So a partnership there makes a ton of sense. And then telling that story together, getting joint customers to help us tell it together, going out and telling that in webinars and case studies and even live events potentially in field. That's what I really think it all bound is. It's just to ensure that you're telling a comprehensive end-to-end value proposition story that someone can wrap their head around fully. Because the thing that I hate is when a company like air traffic control shows up to a CMO's office or a CRO's office and we go, this is your answer to ABM. Dude, no, it's not. It is part of the answer. And if I can tell you what I think the other parts of the answer are, some of which you might have, some of which you might not, what I'm doing is I'm really acting more as a value add guide as a business. And I might lose, but in the long term, I'm going to win because the guys at Aircall are going to show up and they're going to tell the same story. And the guys at Grain and the guys at Revenue Hero and right, like they're going to show up and tell a similar story. And together we end up, I think, comprehensively having a lot more success.
I think it's really so interesting, especially this take on all bound, because oftentimes I think it's seen as a type of go-to-market motion. Where does
Mm,
it fit with inbound, outbound, then even
mhm,
all bound? But to me, it sounds like an ecosystem approach to building your business. So to
mhm.
your point, air traffic control is a part of the overall ecosystem that people can use, but
Yeah,
air traffic control doesn't lose by suggesting that somebody go and use Grain or AirCall or some other app along the way as well.
that's right. Yeah. And I think it's wild to presume that you would ever lose, that anybody would believe that they would lose. Yeah, certainly sometimes a customer is going to have a constrained budget and they have X dollars and they decide that the bigger part of the problem is better solved by the partner. But that's going to be the exception. The more common result is that you're going to win together. And I think it's just winning together. And I think it's approaching it that way, building your product that way, your go to market motion that way, just your mentality that way is about not trying to, do it all by yourself. What do they say? It's if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It sounds goofy, but it absolutely is true.
So I'm sure that you can't get too into the weeds on how exactly this works behind the scenes, but I think it really is an interesting show for, again, the difference of personal content versus personalized content. Because
Yeah.
to be honest, this is a great example of something I would care about that I probably would actually look at that
Mhm.
I didn't even really know was a thing. I'm familiar with Ryan. We're connected on LinkedIn. I follow a lot of his content. Actually, I had no idea he had a podcast. And it is a very interesting approach to delivering personal content. So I love it. I think it's so
I'm
cool.
I'm glad you do. The last kind of piece of the puzzle that I think is really important is because we know what people care about and because we know what a content's content or a company's content is about, we're also in a really interesting spot to help an organization understand how relevant they are with their existing body of content, either to any list that exists in HubSpot. So every list in HubSpot becomes a list that you can filter all the reporting by here in ATC. But when you see that you've got a gap, as we do, you can see how to fill that gap, what subject matter you should cover. And what we do with our reporting on topics is give you an idea about whether or not you've been creating any engagement around it, if interest in that topic has been growing, shrinking, staying stable over time, what you've written about it in the past. We tell you what your competitors have written about the subject matter across both their websites and LinkedIn. We tell you what this audience also cares about. So when you think about like a hub and spoke or a longer form piece of content, it's going to be really high value add. And the thing that's interesting here is what we're basically saying is there's no question we need to cover this. There's 2,000 people sitting in our HubSpot account who are telling us that this is interesting and we don't have anything for them right now. Yikes. I'm quantifying the opportunity. So a lot of what we also think about is how well you understand your audience. And you should frankly wait until you've got content that supports your outbound and other motions until you do have content to support them. Now, a big enterprise will find that oftentimes they'll be 60, 70, 80% relevant, right? But a smaller organization might be 15 or 20% relevant to their audience. And the decision there is, okay, just start making your motions towards those where relevance is already established, and then create content to make your way into relevancy for the rest of this audience that you care about. Because the thing is, when you know that writing this piece of content is going to unlock another 2,000 people in your addressable market, it's easy to put resources behind this, right? What are 2,100 people worth to us? If the equation is quality engagement leads to pipeline, which it is and it does, then this is a no-brainer. We got to sit down and create this content, right? So it's very much a virtuous cycle of let's do what we can with what you've got, and then tell you where to spend your time so that you can scalably maintain a high degree of relevance with the audience you're trying to get in touch with.
Now, you mentioned that all the content populates via those properties, which can be inserted through tokens in HubSpot.
Mhm.
I know from looking at this offline and from prior conversations that those properties can be put into workflows and you can automate a large part of this process. So it would be easy to put it into an email template and send it out with a sequence. But can you show an example of a workflow that automates some of this outbound process?
Yeah. So let me pop into a
Mhm.
right. So here is an evergreen newsletter. And we actually had a playbook on our website, and we had a webinar about this recently. There are these guys that built this thing, AI Studio, out of Resonate. It's a really interesting ability to use LLMs inside of HubSpot. So this is a great example of kind of a better together type of an approach. But basically what this says is because we have those properties, we have properties that say how many unique recommendations have been made of each content type for each contact. So the first part of this workflow essentially says, do I have recommendations for this type of content that I want to send out in this template? If I do, great. The first thing that I do is I actually send all the recommendations to an LLM. So here we're using Anthropic Claude, which I think is super cool. And
Side
we've given,
note, when I definitely want to dive into that decision at some point.
yeah. So here's the
I'll let you
control.
finish, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you finish, but
I'm gonna let you finish. But Kanye moment.
here's what we're trying to do is if we know the recommended content and the content's been already written by the business, what we're essentially saying is, I just want to write a really compelling opening paragraph, not the whole email, just the opening paragraph. And this is a huge issue that we really see with a lot of these generative tools is that their inputs suck or they're non-existent, right? This is how the internet would say this. Dude, I don't want to know how the internet would say this. How would we say it? And here's the thing. In a case like this, where we already know we've written about the subject matter that we're going to be sending to Mark or to Cameron, we did say it. We've already said it. Now what I want to do is I just want to turn it into a different format, which in this case is an opening paragraph. And so we've given it a bunch of examples. We got help from Stuart Balcom, who is awesome, who runs Connected GTM. And it basically says, just create a new property called newsletter intro, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to send that on over and I'm going to use it in this evergreen newsletter template that actually has that opening section automatically written, the newsletter intro, and then it places that recommended content down below. And the part of this workflow that's not here that we strongly suggest is, and put it on a timer with some maximum send rules. So don't send it any more than once every 5 business days. But even if I've got 0 recommendations, send at least something once a month. The point here being If I've got lots of relevant stuff and I'm seeing engagement, let's send more stuff. Let's see if we can ramp this up. If I've got nothing, I at least need to still show up so that awareness doesn't start to die out. If I've earned the right to get you on my newsletter, I don't want to like just ignore you because I don't know anything. And if I do get some engagement, great. I'll start to learn more about you and I'll be able to like lock in and tune in more. But when you think about life cycle marketing, for example, the middle of the funnel, if I come out of a sales call and it's not right now, most AEs will actually, if they're any good, assign follow-up activities to themselves and just plug in once every 3 weeks and be like, hey, Mark, hey, Cameron, I thought I'd send you something. That is an incredibly difficult task. The vast majority of AEs won't get there. They'll just ignore it and be like, not now, I'm leaving. And so what we're saying is if you turn this on for your exits from a sales process, it's going to automatically send them the very best stuff only when you've got really good stuff. And your content team is seeing all the analytics come back on the back end that say, let's filter our reporting based on life cycle. And let's make sure that we've got stuff to support the people who are in there. So it's a really nice way for the content organization to have a really clear call out of these are the 6 topics that we need to write to this month to ensure that our life cycle efforts are as relevant as humanly possible.
This is really, I think, the prime example of when people ask how artificial intelligence is used, there's no single application that I think is the end all be all for every single thing that AI can do. And this is a
That's
very clear example of where you piece together your service and software, but it uses elements of Claude and other elements that play into it. I think that's what makes it so powerful is that it just really bridges the gap on all of these different resources that you're able to pull together and provide a wonderful app.
Dude, I appreciate the comment and I absolutely agree. I think the thing that's really interesting here and what we've really been thinking a lot about with regards to air traffic control is in the AI space, people will talk about, but they have fairly limited familiarity with this concept of RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, which effectively is I'm going to put guardrails around what I'm asking my AI to look at when I am telling it to create something. And that's one of the things that I see as a massive limitation with a lot of the AI SDRs is that they don't really have a RAG model. There are no controlled inputs other than form entries. This is what my product does. This is who my customers are, right? You're going to get really limited use cases there. But if your RAG model is actually informed by every engagement touch point that's in HubSpot, by every piece of content that you have, that is the most phenomenal RAG model you could ever have to drive your revenue engine, period. There's nothing else. My competitors, my partners, this is what everybody has said. And as a result, I can do things like, say, write a great opening paragraph because
Yeah.
I'm not worried about you going off the rails. I'm telling you, don't be creative. Just use these materials. These materials are factually aligned with how we talk about the world and what we believe to be interesting to Mark and Cameron, right? Now, if we got the belief in what would be interesting to you guys wrong, that's a different question. But it's not the AI's fault that we fed it something bad. But we don't. That's what we've worked on here for the last 2.5 years is to make sure that recommendation model has a high degree of confidence when it's making a recommendation.
I feel like RAG would catch on much better if it had a little bit better branding. I feel like the name just doesn't work. But so this is my putting on my geeky AI hat. Was the reason that you went with Claude because it was more effective at being able to work within the context of the retrieval augmented generative?
Yeah, and it really follows the direction to not be creative better than any of them. It is the best with regards to non API level programmatic RAG inputs of all the
Yeah.
LLMs that we have found. Right now, if we were to at some point here at air traffic control automatically create that introductory property, wink wink, we might not use Claude. We might use
Yeah.
something else. I still think that Claude is probably the answer for that type of thing. It really does a great job of hearing you say, do not look at the internet. Do not give me a C grade version of C grade averages. We wrote really great stuff. This is it. Do not go anywhere else.
Yeah.
And it says, okay, I will do exactly that. And again, if you've got 2 blog posts, a case study, and a syndicated item, I promise you that is more than enough material to produce a fantastic opening paragraph.
Yeah, I think the differences between the two become more obvious to me. Claude is certainly a better coding companion, and so maybe that makes sense that it works with RAG better. GPT definitely can be more of a wild card.
Yep. Yep. You can get really great results and really bad ones, which is why, again, if you're scaling up the production of an opening paragraph on an email that might go to 800 people this week, I am not going to be using ChatGPT or OpenAI. I'm going to be using Claude.
Agreed.
Now, I'm curious, Nick, and if there's a visual, let me know. We'll pull the screen back up. But what does onboarding and setup look like for someone that is brand new to ATC? They're plugging it into HubSpot and they want to get this going as fast as possible.
Yeah, I love it, dude. The sign up process is as simple as basically just logging into air traffic control with your HubSpot account. That's it. We create the properties, we populate them, we grab everything that we need. You don't have to map anything. You have to be an admin, but so you can't just have a sales rep show up with a sales seat and get this going. It's got to be somebody who has control over HubSpot. But there are no technical requirements. Like once that's done, it's really a business proposition about what do we do now. During the sign up process, we will ask you what kinds of problems you are most wanting to solve. We did not have this before, so the timing of this discussion is really remarkable. But we do have an onboarding service now. And in fact, it is not optional, it is required. And there's a reason for that, right? Get into demos and people have calls and they go, this is so cool. There's not one person who's ever worked on a life cycle program who has ever fathomed having their life cycle program behave this way. It was impossible, literally impossible, has not ever been doable before. So us installing the technology isn't actually the hard part. Now, it's nice that everything renders overnight and you don't have to do any technical setup. It certainly removes a lot of hurdles for people getting started. And we have them do that during the sales process. So we can actually take somebody through their environment and tell them what we're seeing and what we think the opportunities look like before they come on board. So we really are trying to say, look, this is worthwhile. And in some cases, it's not, right? It's, hey, the content, you're way off. Here's the report. You got to go produce. And that might take you 90 days, but don't start now. This is not the right time. You don't have enough. You don't have enough good stuff. It just is what it is. But when it looks like it's a good scenario, then we lay out a 2-week plan. We'll build a full life cycle program, ABM style kind of content experience pages, different templates, right? Some that are good for follow-up on sales calls, some that are good for customers, right? Et cetera, et cetera. If you need some of that kind of manipulated to work with a headless CMS or a WordPress or something, we can make that happen, right? So slices and those types of things and pushing things around. But the idea is that in the first 2 weeks, you should have an end-to-end ABM machine, right, up and running based on ATC that is completely evergreen, taking advantage of your content and telling you where to spend your time every day on a content production standpoint.
So you'll go in and help to set up the workflows, landing pages,
Yep.
all of that dedicated stuff that would then allow the admin to have everything automated on a recurring basis afterward.
Correct. Yep. That's absolutely right.
That's awesome. Now, you mentioned potentially for some people that maybe it's not the right time, they have to go produce more content. I know you also mentioned that there's the ability to pull in content from elsewhere. So is there a minimum amount of blog content that has to be on their page, or can someone just plug into outside resources regardless?
Yeah, look, depending upon the use case, if you wanted to be like, I don't know, FinTech Today, and you just wanted to send the 3 most interesting articles about FinTech to Cameron and the 3 most interesting articles for Mark, You could do that tomorrow with no content on your website. When you're pulling from major concepts like fintech across 50,000 highly authoritative news sites, I promise you, you're going to have interesting stuff pretty much every day. And there are companies like Smart Brief that do this for a living, but like a human comes into the office in the morning, reads through the same kind of 40, 50 outlets, and then goes, all right, these are the 7 things you have to read if you're, I don't know, in corporate accounting or what have you. So it's a high value proposition. You could create an ad supported business off of it, probably. And I've thought about that as like a side shoot here, just personally to build newsletters that send nothing but personalized content and just adding a little like advertising bar in there and see if I can't make a little side hustle money. But if but the proposition for that for a smaller company in particular is showing thought leadership, pure value add top of funnel, and then all the engagement with that content. If you see that stuff's really clustering around 2 or 3 topics, then you can start to figure out what you want to do. It's like, all right, let's do a webinar or a podcast with somebody on this. Then do what really smart content teams do at really lean orgs, chop that up into videos, turn it into content for the website, turn it into LinkedIn posts, right? So you can learn from that syndicated content behavior and build your own archive up over time. But generally, when we think of a company as fitting our ideal customer profile, they're north of 150 pieces of content. And 2 other things are also true. They have different types or formats. If all you have is a blog, probably an SEO shop, probably not a great fit for us. But if you have case studies, playbooks, courses, podcasts, webinars, videos, that's a really good fit for us. Like the more of those formats you have, that tells us that your content program is more mature and serving a goal across the entire life cycle. Probably not as well as you want it to, which is where we come in. But you do mean for that to be true. That's a big piece. And again, if we're seeing really high bounce rates for people's content or really low scroll depth on people's content, that's probably not a great fit either because it's not good. And the last thing you want to do is be actively redistributing not good content. So we really look for organizations that have an adult at the helm of their content team.
And with the example that you used for my account and it shared the podcast, clearly we can see it's multimedia.
Mhm.
I just wanted to confirm the implication there is that you can do blogs, podcasts, videos, really anything from, is it any source essentially?
Yep, we're totally agnostic. Yeah, we're totally agnostic. We're able to grab stuff from anywhere.
That's so powerful because the question that I would then have is, does the recommendation, if I tend to watch more videos, does the recommendation tend to skew toward video-based content? Or is there like a weighting that gets taken into account?
It's a really good question, Cameron. The answer is no, but what we do is we make recommendations of every type of content a business has. And what we tend to find is that the typing is very much aligned with somebody's stage in the life cycle. Am I starting with a case study for somebody who's aware, but maybe not solution aware? Maybe not. I don't know. If I'm later stage, I absolutely want to deploy case studies all the time. Middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, absolutely case studies all the time, right? Courses to middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, right? Like those video courses that we see some companies doing are unbelievable, right? But one of the things that we talk a lot about is actually earning depth of content engagement, right? So we also have another workflow that says if I'm getting at least a couple of clicks in the last 30 days on my program, I'm going to start recommending a different type of content. I'm going to ask you to show up to a recorded webinar or one of our podcasts. And if I get you to spend now 30 minutes with me or 45 minutes with me, now I'm starting to get a different depth of engagement. But what I'm trying to do in the beginning is just say, let's deploy a couple of blog posts and maybe a piece of syndicated content just to earn some engagement. And then over time, let's look at the engagement patterns to start to serve other types of content. That all being said, we are tracking this as a facet of behavior in the back end. At some point, we very much would see ourselves being able to say, sure, these are all the unique types that have been recommended for Cameron, but it's actually this one. It is if of all the things, it's this one because the format, the subject matter, et cetera, et cetera.
I know you shared an example of the workflow that automates the email going out. Do you find that most companies tend to lean toward workflow automation versus plugging this into a sequence where a rep has to choose, okay, email one, email two,
Yeah.
or is it split and just dependent?
We're seeing a lot more when it comes to the sales rep use. We present next best content on the contact record, or it's just an easy thing to set up with your properties. And what we find is that the reps are then looking at that and going, all right, awesome. I'm going to go grab that and just drop it in here to this template, or I'm going to go and maybe I'm using HubLead and I'm doing some LinkedIn outreach and I'm just going to make sure that I track all the behavior against that back to HubSpot, which is really cool. And I'm going to go drop that into a DM, right? I know what it is and I'll make some decisions about when and where. In terms of sequencing, we're getting a lot more usage out of marketing, lifecycle, et cetera. I think on the sequencing side, it depends on the types of content and the volume. If I'm outbound sequencing as a BDR or an AE, whatever, I think that if I have enough case studies, those recommendations dropping dynamically into a sequence make a lot of sense. But sending a blog post in a cold outbound email is like, dude, what? I don't know who you are. I have no context for this. And you're asking me to read a piece of content. Doesn't matter how relevant it is. It's just a bit of a weird experience. I think it's a weird way to approach that. But email one, hey, we do something really cool. Again, back to our point before about signals. And I think you are a person based upon thing I just saw that should be looking at this. Great first email. Two, by the way, I grabbed one of our case studies after looking at your business a little bit more that I think you'd really find super compelling. Here you go. If you've got two case studies, dude, just put in whatever your like best one is to your second email in your cadence. But if you're one of those businesses that has 50 of them, super useful for an outbound cadence, right? It's like, all right, but this is the one for this person. She's going to like this one in particular. So again, it's because they're properties, whatever. It's like all over the place.
Definitely makes sense. On a personal note, what was the um, inspiration for developing and building the business? How did ATC get to
And
becoming
the
what it is
name.
today?
How did it become the name? Where did the name
Yeah.
come from?
Yeah.
That's a really
Yeah.
good question.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
real question.
I was walking down the street and
You got hit
talking.
by it. You got hit by an airplane?
Got hit by an airplane, lived. I'm really big. I'm huge. And the airplane was small. No, so the first thing is I've always been very content forward. So when I started my career years ago as an inside sales guy and then an outside sales guy. And when I was inside sales, this is back when fax machines were like a thing that everybody had, trying to get meetings with senior level executives. And I worked for a business research company. And I would take pages from the reports and I would photocopy them. And then I would send the first 3 pages of a 7-page report in a fax to 100 people. And then I would call them and say, do you want the other 4 pages? Dude, it was such a phenomenal motion, like crushed quotas, 300%, 350% of quota, like month in, month out. And I was like, oh, it's content. Like the content's the jam. That's my land and expand. That's how I get in. And ever since then, content's always been a huge aspect of how I've gone to market. And then eventually I got into product and marketing and then CRO type roles. And then I launched a business in 2011, like a HubSpot for higher ed, but personalization was at the core of it. And what we basically said was, wow, this university has tons of content, right? Like one of our customers was Georgia Tech. As an enterprise, distributed, decentralized, but as an enterprise, that organization produced 500 to 1,000 pieces of content a week. Juggernaut, dude. Same with the University of Southern California. Same with Cornell. Like all these guys that we worked with. They produced incredible volumes of content. Nobody knew about any of it. So we were like, whoa, this is the engagement opportunity. Let's centralize it all and then redistribute it. And we built this like interest model. We sold that company in 2018, took a breather, and it was like, man, the mistake, we made 2 of them. Building the mousetrap, building a better mousetrap, right? And 2, selling anything to higher education, which was remarkably challenging. I was like, what if we just plugged into the systems of record that people already use? There have to be endpoints for this stuff in HubSpot and Salesforce and Marketo and whatever. And there's not one marketing system on the planet that doesn't give us visibility into the things that we need to be able to see to build an interest graph. And we're like, this is great. You can create properties through an API. You can populate properties through an API. That's the jam. Stop making better mousetraps, dude. Like, just improve this one. And so we went through that route. We decided on HubSpot, which is really great. But the naming on air traffic control is really about our job, right? Our job is an intelligence layer between your content and every piece of engagement and every individual, and trying to route the right things to the right people at the right time, which is precisely what a air traffic control tower does.
Get back to the core concept that we've covered today, which is sending content to people that they care about. And ultimately, you don't have to be the authority figure on every single piece of content that's going out. Certainly, if you have the volume to support that and you want it to be focused on your own content, then I'm sure that you have plenty of customers that are like that. But I know that as a recipient, and I'm sure that many of our viewers feel the same, listeners, you don't only want to be receiving content from one source. That doesn't necessarily make it more helpful, right? You want to
Yep.
see the name, you want to be plugged into them and their community, but helpful and relevance is really the key.
Spot on. Yeah, spot on. And you get points for what you do end up sending of your own by being an organization that steps forward and sends other things that are not their own. And a lot of that came from watching what some of the best salespeople in the world do. They're just like, hey, Cameron, read this, thought you'd find it interesting. Not ours, just picked it up, saw it on Forbes, reminded me of you here. Now you can automate that. And I think that's really cool.
It definitely makes marketing less campy because now you have content that is not just about me, but it's about the contact. You're saying, yes, I think that you will care about this, but it's not just here's my case study that you might care about. So it really is so powerful. Nick, before we end the episode, any final comments, thoughts, anything you'd like to share or show pertaining to ATC?
No, we went through it. And like I said, we're happy to get anybody set up for free and take you through it and see if we can be helpful. And we're more than willing to find out that we're not. Like I said, when I don't like bad fit customers, it's not good for anybody. So we're pretty forward about that. But we are always eager to take people through their own account and get them set up and see if we can be useful, right? At least deliver some insights. So if anybody's interested, drop me a line. Nick Zeckets, I'm on LinkedIn, or in Zeckets at airtrafficcontrol.io. If you want to email me, I'm always online pretty much these days. No sleep.
For those who aren't familiar, do make sure you connect with the three of us on LinkedIn: Cameron Collins, Mark Lerner, Nick Zeckets. You can also check out Mark and I in the Sprocketeer community, where we help thousands of HubSpot members, and we're extremely active in the community. It's completely free on Slack. And make sure you also check out our friends Kyle Jepson and Deanna Gloff. They host the HubSpot Admin Hug Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Central. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Sprocket on.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to the Sprocket Pod podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode with your co-hosts, Cameron Collins and Mark Lerner. Be sure to catch us live every week on LinkedIn, and don't forget to subscribe to our episodes on YouTube and Spotify. If you found this episode valuable, please leave a review and share it with others looking to get more from HubSpot. Until next time, keep driving success with your CRM, and as always, Sprocket on.